What's up, everybody? It's your boy Ellison Jordan, the host of the Unheard Athlete Podcast. Welcome back. This is episode two. No, excuse me. This is part two of my high school journey, sophomore year. So, before we were talking about my freshman year, and now we're going to go into my sophomore year. So, get ready for the ride on this one. So, my sophomore year was probably my favorite year. Not because of the year, not because of anything else, just specifically how I was as a football player. Going in, but I'm that's for later down the line on why it was my favorite year. Going down or going into my sophomore year, before my freshman year, I was a nose guard. So basically, I was a head up on the center. I wore number 71. I was a little smaller back then. Wasn't as strong. I was still strong, but I wasn't as strong as I was my sophomore year. Wasn't doing a lot of other things, was trying other things out. So I was strictly a nose guard. I was kind of like one dimensional. That all changed my sophomore year. When I got into my sophomore year, I had my number changed because I was playing fullback. So, your boy played a little fullback. I was like a pretty hard nosed fullback. I was used to block a lot. Never ran the ball for real, for real. Well, later down the line I did, but that comes later. Um, I did a lot of blocking. Never caught the ball, but just really was just there as a H back basically. So I'll play like off the line of scrimmage. I'll be in the backfield in the I formation, etc. They wanted to use me more my sophomore year. They saw what I could do my freshman year. They saw I could move. I was strong, etc. They saw what things I could accomplish. So going to my sophomore year, I had more responsibility now. I was still on the younger side. I was 16 years old going into my sophomore year. Still had no offers. Was still trying to make a name for myself. Well, I already made a name for myself, but I was trying to make an even more bigger name for myself to the other colleges and stuff. So sophomore year was my favorite just because of the responsibility I had on the field, things I did on the field, and just I felt like that was prime Ellison Jordan as a high school football player. That was just a great time, being there and playing and stuff like that. And I was able to show my talents for sure. So going to my sophomore year, I'm keep saying going to my sophomore year. In my sophomore year, um, a lot of expectations were on us because we lost a lot of seniors. So it was really just a new group of guys who came in as freshmen, and then the older guys who were juniors now seniors, and then the guys who were sophomores who are now juniors, and now my class who were freshmen last year now being sophomore. So everybody was just trying to, you know, um, everybody was just trying to fill in that gap in terms of what they had to do for the responsibility on the team. For me, I wasn't like one of the leaders. I want to say I led by example mainly. I was never like a vocal leader, but I was somebody who led by action. So I wasn't like the head captain or nothing like that, but I was one of the returners for sure. I was one of the more experienced guys because I played freshman. I played as I started as a freshman on varsity last year. I knew what things I had to do, and I knew what was going to lead up to that going to my sophomore year. So sophomore year comes around, we play good counsel. So we played good counsel all 4 years, by the way. So this was like a head up straight rivalry we had with them during that tenure. And the council was the first game of our season. And we played them at Townsend. So that's a neutral site. It's not at our home field, but it's not their home field either. It was more of a neutral site. It was in Townsend. So Townsend's like close, like 15, 20 minutes from Gilman, maybe even less. So that's basically our home field. We had like home field advantage because it was like in our area, but it wasn't at it wasn't at our stadium. It wasn't at our field. So we played at Townsend. It was also on ESPN. And that game, that's when I started playing fullback. Did I play fullback that game? I don't think I played fullback that game, but I was playing a new position called the three technique spot. Now, for my football guys who know the difference between the nose guard and the three technique, the nose guard is basically someone who's straight up head up on the center, and then the three technique is basically someone who is, splitting the offensive guard in half. So I'm playing half a shoulder, if you can see on YouTube, I'm playing half the shoulder on the guard. So that's where I was playing at. And with that, you get a little more freedom. You have a little more leeway, in your pass rush. You have a little more leeway. Um, you can wiggle more, not wiggle more, but those are guys who are a little more elusive, a little more quick twitch guys. Not saying that I wasn't a quick twitch guy last year. I was, but just guys who were quicker, I guess. And at the time that last year or my freshman year, there was somebody who was older than me at that spot. So then when he left, he was a senior. And when he left, I took over that position. So that allowed me to kind of, get more active and make more plays and stuff like that. Because my freshman year, I made plays, but then I would also eat up a lot of double teams. I would also, not get the glory all the time. I had to open up plays for other people as well. But now playing 3 technique, I have more opportunity to make more plays with that. So it was a good time, playing 3 technique, and I played that spot for the next 3 years from sophomore to my senior year. So sophomore, junior, senior, I played the 3 technique spot. Going back to the first game we had versus Good Counsel, that game was on ESPN, like I said, another ESPN game, and it was pretty tough at first because that's a very talented team. That was a team who was still highly ranked in the country and one of the best teams, or at the time the best team in the state. They were one of the best teams in the state that year. And that was a team we had to go up against. So that game went down to the wire a little bit because they had some guys that left. We were both in the same spot. We had a lot of seniors that left my freshman year or after my freshman year. Your council had a lot of seniors that left after that year. So it was gonna be like an even matchup. So, that game went back and forth. They scored first, I believe. Then we scored later. I'm trying to look at the box score, excuse me. At first I remember now thinking about it, they actually went up 2 touchdowns. Looking back at it now, they actually went up 2 touchdowns in the first quarter. And then it's like, we were struggling a little bit. It's kind of like deja vu when we were playing against Archbishop Moeller my freshman year and we just got blown out. But with this game, we actually turned the tables a little bit and we actually won that game. And the score was 20-14. They only scored in the first quarter. They didn't score in the rest of the game. They only scored 2 touchdowns in the first quarter, and then they scored the rest of the game. So it was actually, I remember the play. It was actually, last play of the game. They were trying to score, and one of our players actually made the game-winning tackle versus Good Counsel, and he was a good player back in the day. So that was a pretty great game, man. We started off the season with a victory. We started off the season with a win, with a dub. So that was nothing but, blessings on top of blessings, making an impact, making, a statement to start the season that we are still Gilman and we're still here, as a program. And I remember personally, individually, I didn't have no sacks that game and I didn't really do much that game. I had like a couple tackles, like 2 or 3 tackles, maybe 4, between 2 and 4 tackles. I can't remember. It was around that, that amount of tackles, but I didn't do that much that game. But I was glad we got the win. I wanted to get a sack, and like I've always been like this too. Like I've always I want to win as a team, but I want to do well as well. I want to compete to the highest level. I want to, show that I can compete with guys who are bigger than me, etc. And during that game, I was competing. I was competing with guys who were committed to like other D1 schools and who were bigger than me. I remember competing against a couple guys that I actually played youth football with. There's like 2 or 3 guys I played with in youth football back at KLM who were playing at Good Counsel. So that was just like come to realization moments like, wow, we used to play with each other, now playing against each other in high school. So that was just a pretty great moment as well. But we took the dub, we won the dub. Not won the dub, but we got the dub versus Good Counsel. And that was a great moment then. During that season, we thought we were going to run the table. We thought everything was in our hands. We thought we had all the tools, despite losing a whole bunch of seniors. That year, we thought we had everything, but we weren't bad. We were never a bad team during my 4 years. We were never a bad team, but my sophomore year, that was a down year, and it started in the next game versus Manatee. Manatee, for you, those of you who don't know, I don't know about them now, but Manatee and either any school from Florida, any school from Florida, you're a football player from Florida, you're a baller for sure. But in terms of high school, Manatee was one of the best teams in the country. Uh, During the time, they had a whole bunch of D1 athletes, and they were just speedsters, man. They were just quick, and they actually came up to Maryland to play us at the University of Maryland. So initially, we knew what we were going getting. We knew what we were getting into. We knew what we were going up against, but we felt like we had the tools and stuff to win. And we thought this would be not an easy one, but we thought we could get the win. Mind you, our first game or first play, they were so fast, like they ran like a zone. And I actually remember getting the first tackle, the first play of the game, and actually had a really great game individually. That game for me personally was a pretty good game for me. I had like 7 or 8 tackles, half of those tackles for losses, and I had 2 sacks that game. And so that was against a highly ranked team, a highly ranked team in Manatee. Had a great offensive line, great quarterback, great running back. They were great all across the board, and actually gained respect from those guys, for Manatee, because they saw what I can do my sophomore year. But that's just individually. But as a team, we got smoked. We got obliterated. We lost like 44-14, and that was just that was a bad day. I remember the next day of practice, we had to we ran. I remember running like till the wheels fall off, really, until our tongues fell off, man, because we just got our butts whooped. We just got our butts whooped. I don't want to say the other word, but we got our butts kicked really, really bad by Manatee. And Manatee was just, they were the better team that day. They were the better team that day, and they got to us really bad. Like it was a bad day, as a team. But for me personally, I don't want to go off the rails and talk about me as much, even though this is a podcast about me. But just about, I know we lost as a team, and that was unfortunate that we lost as a team. But individually, it kind of showed that I can still play at a high level, and not just play at a high level, but play against like other talented teams who have like a whole bunch of D1 prospects and D1 commits, and just this is a team from Florida, and Florida is one of the best. Florida is one of the best states for football ever in the country. They're just like, that's like the hotbed for football. Them, Texas, Georgia, California. They're one of the Mount Rushmores of like high school football states in the country. So to play against a team like Manatee and to have a game like I did, was good. And that's where people started to notice for sure. I remember being on TV a little bit. It wasn't ESPN, but it was kind of like some type of Fox network type TV, and people were like starting to notice who Ellison Jordan was. So that was good. So the next game we played against was Paramus. Now, for those of you who don't know who Paramus or what Paramus is or who Paramus is, Paramus Catholic School is in New Jersey. And that team, during that time in 2013, they had a guy named Jabril Peppers. Most of you who follow football know who Jabril Peppers is, knows who Jabril Pepper is, and knows that he's an elite football player. So during that time, we had to play him. So that was somebody. So we had to play Manatee. We just got smoked by Manatee. Now we had to play Paramus and Jabril Peppers. So I wasn't gonna say that we knew we were going to lose, but we knew it was going to be a tough day. It was going to be a rough day. I don't think I knew we wasn't going to lose, I didn't say like, oh, we're gonna lose this game, and I don't feel like we had that. I'm speaking for myself. I didn't feel like we are gonna lose, but I knew it was gonna be a ball game for sure, and that turned out being a another embarrassing loss for us. They beat us like 28-0. So at their place, we went up to New Jersey and we got our butts whooped again. So basically, like um, that season, the start the season, we started off good. We started off with a win versus Good Council, another great team. But then when we played against Manatee and Paramus, we just got obliterated. And it was just kind of like, you know, uh, that was just at the time how our season was going. We were losing a whole bunch of games. We were not a whole bunch of games, but we lost some games that kind of set the tone for our season. That it wasn't going to be like an elite season. It wasn't going to be like last year for sure. It wasn't going to be like last year, but it was going to be a rough season for sure, and it was. So, and then individually, they scouted me really well that game. I remember like talking to one of the offensive linemen. His name was Billy Ray. Offensive lineman named Billy Ray, and I remember him after the game. He went to Virginia Tech and stuff like that. I remember him telling me that they scouted me and they game planned for me that game because they saw what I did last game versus Manatee, so they just scouted and game planned for me that game, and they did a really good job. I didn't do that much that game. I had no sacks, only had like 3 tackles. But it was a learning experience, and I was 16, sophomore still, and I was still learning the game still, and they got us that day for sure. Paramus is a great organization. They were a great program, and that still is. I don't know a lot about them now, but at that time with Jabril Peppers and those guys, they had a whole bunch of great players. And I remember actually tackling Jabril Peppers in the backfield for a loss. I think I remember tackling Jabril Peppers in the backfield for a loss. So, it was a pretty good, you know, it was a pretty, a good experience to play against a team like that at their place and play in that atmosphere. Play versus a team, play a team like that. We were still a good team, but unfortunately that day we weren't. They had us. They had our number that day. So that was pretty embarrassing, but nonetheless, we started winning a little bit. We played this team called Anacostia. Uh, that team, did we play Anacostia? We played somebody. I don't think it was Anacostia. It was somebody else. But we started playing, we started playing, conference play. We started getting into conference play. We started playing the teams like Mount St. Joe's, Loyola. Mount St. Joe's we beat pretty bad, 42-6. I'm looking at the box score as I'm talking over, so I'm just like trying to make sure I get the scores right. We beat Loyola 47-0. Spalding was a close game. We nearly lost that game, and that would have been bad because at the time, that's another thing. Like last episode, they took away playoffs. So we wasn't going based off of like, oh, one of the best teams. If you're one of the top 4 teams, you play in the playoffs the next week, based off regular season, you played regular season and you were done. Which had me so mad because I don't know why they took away playoffs. Because you're taking away the competitive side of what football is, and then it's like redemption games, like, regular season, you may do bad in the regular season, but they could have redeemed yourself in the playoffs. And they took that away from us. And I never got that. I need to ask like coach or somebody I know back in the day. I'll ask them like, why did they take away playoffs from us? That was just, I didn't get that. That was silly to me, but it is what it is. But, we got in the conference play. We were playing some of those teams and we nearly lost to Spalding, but it was a 29-21. They nearly beat us. And Spalding, they're a good program for sure, but I didn't know, what you call, I didn't know that they had it to the point where they can compete with us. And maybe it was just a down year for us. Maybe, and it was. and I'll show you why, and I'll tell you why it was a down year. You know, it's just that we lost a lot of seniors. You know, we had some seniors that came. We had some guys who were juniors that turned into seniors that came back, but we were a young team for sure. We had a lot of youth on our side. We had a lot of youth. We had a few seniors that were going D1. We had like how many guys? How many seniors we had go D1? We had like maybe we had like guys who went to college, but the guys who went like D1, we only had like 3 or 4. Yeah, we only had like 3 or 4 seniors that year that went D1 that were going D1. And then it's like everybody was just young. So I was young, other guys were young. We were like mainly just build a freshmen and sophomores mainly guys from my class and stuff like that. So we were a young team, but that was no excuse as well because just because you're young, that doesn't mean you can still play ball and still be talented and still be very experienced and stuff like that. And we had talent. We just wasn't as I don't want to say it wasn't as together, but it just wasn't a good year. And we were young, we lost a lot of experience, and it showed. So when we played against Spalding, like we're going into like games like last year, my freshman year, we were beating everybody in the MIAA. We were beating, you know, Spalding and Calvert, McDonald, Loyola, like by a lot. And even this year, the games that we won, it was still felt like it was closer than it needed to be. And Spalding was one of those games that it was closer where it needed to be. So it's one of those games. Now, that was Archbishop Spalding. When we played against Calvert Hall, we beat the brakes off them. We beat them like 37-9. And that game was a good game for me personally. I had like 2 sacks that game, or 2.5 sacks, some TFLs and stuff like that. I was getting active for sure. And you know, that was a game like Calvert Hall. Calvert Hall is a rival of ours, but McDonald was the main rival. But Calvert Hall was like one of our biggest rivalries during that conference in that conference. I mean, if it wasn't McDonald, it was Calvert Hall. So every time we beat Calvert Hall was always like a great win because it's like we never really cared for those guys and stuff like that for sure during that time. Great ball, great competitiveness from both sides of the ball, but we always love to give Calvert Hall the business, and we always did. And just wanted to say that. And then there's this new team called St. Francis, and I like to talk about this game. This is probably my favorite game, and this is probably why. That was probably the reason why it was my favorite year because of that game versus St. Francis. St. Francis was a new team that came to the MIAA. I mean, they were in the MIAA, but during that time, you had MIAA A, B, and C. St. Francis before they became who they are today, like they're just a national powerhouse. They wasn't like that back in the day. St. Francis was not that good back in the day. They weren't. They were like MIAA. They were MIAA-C, and then once they moved to MIAA, they weren't like in the top nothing. They were in the bottom. They're always in the bottom tier team. They were one of the worst teams in the MIAA. They were. That's during that time. Now, one of the best teams ever in high school football, in my opinion. One of the best teams ever in high school football. But during that time, they had a lot of stuff going on. But when we played against them at Patterson Park, that game for me was just like it was like a video game. It's like video game numbers. I had, multiple sacks. I had like probably 3 sacks, a lot of tackles, and I really just took over the game versus St. Francis. I remember like looking at the film. They just kept like doing this. They kept like doing these pulls, and for me, that's like easy money because if you're gonna pull the guard and not slam the center down or have the tackle cut me, you're leaving me wide open. So every time they kept pulling the guard, I was pulling the guard, or they kept pulling the guard. I was in the backfield making a tackle. So that was just like that was just easy money for me. So there was like multiple times I kept pulling the guard, and I just kept making an attack in the backfield. And then it was like, in terms of as a team, they weren't, like I said, they weren't that good. So it was easy to kind of like manhandle them. And it was funny too because I actually got into a couple fights, not like fist fights, but we got like into scuffles with St. Francis because they were losing pretty bad. And that was because I was giving them the business my sophomore year in 2013, and I remember just kind of like giving them so much work. They were trying to fight me, and I'm competitive, so I was trying to go back at them. So I'm like having my teammates kind of calm me down and hold me back and stuff like that. And that was a good game. And I was like talking trash that game. I'm gonna hold it. I was talking real trash, like real big time trash. I don't even like talking trash, but some points when I get competitive, I'll do some trash talking, But it got to the point where I said, because obviously St. Francis, they're in the heart of the city too. They're like deep in the heart of the city. They are next to a jail or a prison. No, they're next to a prison and all that. So St. Francis, is one of the oldest schools in Baltimore, I believe, and I might be one of the oldest schools in the country. And that team, they have a lot of resilience for sure. But during that time, they just didn't have the resources, so they weren't that good. But I remember, when we were playing against St. Francis that day, and I remember just talking trash, saying like, "This is my city," and my teammates told me to chill, like, "You can't be saying that because you're in Baltimore, so you don't know what's gonna happen." So I got so hyped, I was like, "This is my city. I run this city." I was just like this hype that day. So, that was a big, big game for me, and that's why. And I had a lot of games like that. I had that versus St. Francis, obviously. I had that versus Manatee. I had that versus Calvert Hall. I had that versus Loyola a little bit. I had that Mount St. Joe's, and then there was a time we scrimmaged Francis Collegiate. Francis Collegiate is another school that's a really great school. And in my sophomore year, we played them. We didn't play them in a regular game, but we scrimmaged them, and that was a pretty good scrimmage for us because we won that game. We won that scrimmage by a lot, and that scrimmage, I remember just flying around. I remember making a whole bunch of plays. I remember just using my pass rush moves and working on my pass rush moves and just being so efficient with my pass rush moves and stuff like that, and getting in the backfield, making plays in the backfield and stuff. So, I was like those games, like the Francis Collegiate scrimmage, the Manatee scrimmage, the St. Francis game, the Calvert Hall game, Loyola, where I had a pretty good game as well. Mount St. Joe's. Like that year, that was becoming my favorite year because I felt like I was in my prime. I feel like, I felt like that was the best version of Ellison Jordan my high school year for sure. And that's how I felt like, and that's what I felt like until we played McDonough. And that's where our season ended up being pretty bad. So we beat McDonough senseless last year, like 40-0, I believe. I had to go back and look, but it was like 40-0. Um, they held a grudge about that, and they gave us a business at their place, like pretty bad. So I remember, you know, going into the game, we thought we were going to beat these guys like senseless. We were cocky. We thought we were going to beat them senseless because we just beat St. Francis. I'm thinking I was going to have a big game and stuff like that. I'm thinking it was going to be a pretty good game, but it turned out to be a little bit of a nightmare. It was kind of like a real nightmare. Like this is actually happening. They were running around us. They were running through us. I remember. I ain't gonna hold you. I remember getting put on my butt. I remember getting pancaked because it was a kick out block. So I was coming up the field. They had me playing DN that game. So because they wanted to use my quickness and stuff like that to see what I can do. So there was a time where I was coming up the field and I didn't look inside, and one of the guards, his name was Wyatt Cook, great player. He came and knocked me on my butt for sure on a kick out block. So that was pretty embarrassing. I didn't like that. I still have a grudge about that. But Wyatt Cook is a great player, and he's a cool guy. He's a cool guy too. But long story short, um, that game was so bad that they beat us senseless. McDonough beat us senseless, 37-6, and that was just a bad game. And I remember like their fans, like the McDonough school section, running onto the field and doing all that type of stuff. And what else? I remember them like just cheering and stuff like that. And then we're on the sidelines just sad. And I was kind of like, "Dag, this is how it feels to lose a rivalry game." So this is like, and we lost. That was the 98th Gilman McDonough game in 2013, and we lost big time. And that was pretty big eye opener because that year wasn't our year. And it showed in multiple games. It showed in Paramus game. It showed in versus Manistee when we got smoked by Manistee. It showed a little bit versus Spalding because we nearly lost versus Spalding, and it showed in versus McDonough. So it just wasn't our day. It just wasn't our day, and it wasn't our season, and we lost pretty bad. And you need some of those lessons to know, like, some points in life you gotta take some L's to get some wins. You gotta take some L's to get some W's. If that makes sense. You gotta learn some lessons. You gotta take some L's so you can get W's later on in life. And for me individually, and for us as a team, that was a big L. That season was a big L. We finished the season. We finished the season 7-4, but it felt like we finished like 4-7, like 2-7 or 2-9, because we underachieved that year for sure. And for me personally, I feel like individually I had a decent season. I mean, obviously that game I did not have a good game at all. That was not a good game for me. I had 4 tackles, I believe. 4 tackles, but like, it just felt like I didn't make an impact at all. I didn't make no type of impact. I was not in the zone. My mind was not on the game. It was just a bad day. This is a bad day. So, however, individually, I started racking up some more accolades. I remember getting all first team MIAA. I remember making all Metro for Baltimore, first team all Metro for Baltimore. I remember making all state, first team all state. I was like one of the only sophomores on the all state team, on the first team all state team. Then I also got named Max Preps All American again, second team for the second time in a row. So I made back to back Max Preps All American. Sorry, I remember making back to back Max Preps All American twice, back to back. So I started racking up awards. And at the time, schools started to notice. Colleges started to notice. I remember, I remember like back at Gilman, there was just room where like college coaches would come in and visit the school where they would meet the kids and stuff, like meet the students and stuff like that who they were looking at. And I remember one day Michigan State was in there, and I don't remember seeing them or nothing like that, but because I had to do something. But I remember like it was yesterday. I was on Twitter, and one of my teammates was congratulating me for something. I was like, "What are you talking about?" And I didn't know what everybody was talking about. So then I got a call, or my dad got a call from one of my coaches. My dad came in the room, and then I remember my dad was telling me that a school just offered you a scholarship. This is after my sophomore year, by the way. This is like in January. I remember my dad was got off the phone with one of the coaches saying that one of the schools has offered you a scholarship, and that school was Michigan State. And I tell you, I remember we was in the dining room upstairs in my house. We was in the dining room. I remember yelling and shouting so much. I remember running around the dining room just jumping for joy because I was so excited because Michigan State just offered me. And that was a big offer at the time because Michigan State, they were one of the best teams in the country. I think they finished in the top 3 or they were number 2 that year. They beat Ohio State in the Big Ten championship, and they beat Stanford in the Rose Bowl. And then after that, they just offered me. So I was just so ecstatic. I was excited. I was happy. I was blessed. I was like, wow, I finally got my big D1 offer. Despite being an undersized lineman, I still was racking up accolades, all state, all Metro, all American, and I made a big impact to the point where I got an offer from a big time D1 school. Not just a small D1 school, like a Big Ten, like a Power 5 from a Big Ten. The Big Ten was one of the best conferences, if not the best conferences at the time. So having Michigan State offer me and being my first offer after my sophomore year was just a big blessing. I was so ecstatic. And after the Michigan State offer, that's when more offers start to build up. So, but that will be it for now. That's ball game. We'll talk about more about the other offers I got next episode for part 3. That will be junior year. I appreciate you guys for tuning in. I appreciate you guys for listening, and I hope you had a good time listening to my sophomore year, and hopefully junior year will be a lot better. So thank you. Have a blessed one.